I never thought I'd be calculating the dollar value of motherhood. But here I am, Sarah Matthews, 32 years old with a marketing degree gathering dust while I change diapers and negotiate toddler tantrums. 3 years ago, I was climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm in Boston, presenting campaigns to Fortune 500 executives and managing a team of 7. Then came the surprise of my life when my husband Michael and I discovered we were expecting twins. The pregnancy was difficult, the delivery even more so. And afterward, looking into the tiny faces of Emma and Ethan, something shifted inside me. Michael and I ran the numbers and made what felt like the obvious choice at the time. With his higher salary as a software architect and my desire to be there for all those first moments, I'd step away from my career temporarily to be a stay-at-home mom. The first sign that this decision wouldn't be universally celebrated came 6 months after the twins were born, when my mother-in-law Eleanor finally made the trip from Chicago to see her grandchildren. I spent 3 days preparing for her visit, deep cleaning our suburban home, planning an elaborate dinner with all of Michael's childhood favorites, even hand-stitching little outfits for the twins that matched the colors in old photos of Michael as a baby. The evening started well, with Eleanor cooing over the babies while I put the finishing touches on dinner. But as we sat down to eat, she looked around the living room with its scattered toys and asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "So, Sarah, when do you think you'll get back to real work? Playing house must be getting boring after so many months." I felt the first sting of those words but brushed them off, chalking it up to generational differences. After all, Eleanor had worked as an accountant throughout Michael's childhood, a fact she mentioned at least 3 times during dinner. "I'm actually loving being home with the twins," I replied, reaching for Michael's hand across the table. "We decided this was best for our family right now." Eleanor nodded with that same tight smile, and I remember thinking that with time and enough effort on my part, we'd build a wonderful relationship. I had no idea that this seemingly innocent comment was just the first drop in what would become a torrential storm of undermining that would eventually force me to quantify exactly what my contribution to our family was worth. 6 months after Eleanor's first visit, the twins were reaching their first birthday, and the pattern had already established itself. Eleanor had moved from Chicago to a condo just 20 minutes away, wanting to be more involved in her grandchildren's lives. Her weekly Sunday visits became a fixture in our schedule, and with each visit came another subtle dig. "It's so nice that you can just help out at home while Michael provides for the family," she'd say, while watching me simultaneously breastfeed one baby while spoon-feeding the other. Or, "Michael looks tired, he must be working so hard to support all of you," as if I spent my days lounging on the sofa eating bonbons. The reality of my life looked nothing like Eleanor's implications. My days started at 5:30 when Ethan would wake crying, followed quickly by Emma. I'd change them, feed them, clean up the inevitable messes, play with them, put them down for naps that rarely synchronized, prepare their food, clean more messes, do laundry that multiplied like rabbits, squeeze in quick showers when possible, handle doctor appointments, research developmental milestones, sing ABCs, and row, row, row your boat until I heard the songs in my dreams, all while maintaining our home so Michael could focus entirely on work when he was there and rest when he needed to. By the time Michael walked through the door at 7 in the evening, I'd have dinner ready, the twins bathed, the house relatively tidy, and I'd be running on fumes but still smiling because despite the exhaustion, I loved being there for every first. First smile, first laugh, first time rolling over, first words. I treasured these moments even as I collapsed into bed each night, too tired to even scroll through social media. But according to Eleanor, I was just helping out. I tried everything to win her approval. I cooked her favorite meals when she visited, kept the house spotless despite having 2 babies determined to create chaos, dressed the twins in the clothes. She bought even when they were impractical and asked her advice about parenting even when I disagreed with her outdated views. Michael worked long hours and was often too tired to notice the dynamic developing between his mother and me. When I'd tentatively mention her comments, he'd say, "That's just Mom's way. She doesn't mean anything by it." And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then came the afternoon I was in the kitchen preparing snacks while Eleanor was in the living room with the twins, and I overheard her phone conversation. "No, I can't make bridge on Sundays anymore. I have to check on Michael and the kids. The girl who looks after my grandchildren isn't exactly mother material, if you know what I mean." I froze, The knife I was using to cut apple slices suspended mid-air as the words sliced through me more effectively than the blade ever could. Girl who looks after my grandchildren. Not daughter-in-law, not the twins' mother, just the babysitter. I wiped away tears before returning to the living room, smile firmly fixed in place, because I still believed that with enough effort, enough patience, I could earn her respect. I was determined to prove my worth as both a mother and a daughter. In law, even as doubt began to creep in about whether I was indeed overreacting to what Michael dismissed as just mom being mom. 3 months after that overheard phone call, with the twins now 15 months old and taking their first wobbly steps, Eleanor decided it was time for a proper family gathering. The family should see how big the children are getting, she announced during one of her Sunday visits, not asking but telling. I've already called everyone. We'll do it here next Saturday. Here, in my home, without consulting me first. I swallowed my objection, telling myself this was an opportunity to finally forge better relationships with Michael's extended family, whom I'd only met at our wedding 4 years earlier. I spent the week preparing, planning a menu that accommodated everyone's dietary restrictions, organizing activities for the children who would be coming, and deep cleaning every corner of the house. The twins were going through a clingy phase, which made preparations twice as challenging as I balanced their needs with party prep. The morning of the gathering, Eleanor arrived 3 hours early to help. Within minutes, she'd rearranged my carefully planned buffet table, replaced the homemade hummus I'd prepared with store-bought, and switched my carefully selected playlist to what she called more appropriate background music. Sarah, dear, she said, surveying my vegetable tray with a critical eye, don't you think store-bought would look more professional? And these napkins don't match the plates at all. Good thing I brought some proper ones. Each suggestion came with the implication that my choices weren't good enough, not quite up to the Matthews family standard. I bit my tongue and reminded myself, for Michael, for the twins, for family harmony. As relatives began arriving, I put on my brightest smile and welcomed everyone, only to have Eleanor consistently introduce me as Michael's wife who stays home with the kids, rather than by my name. Throughout the afternoon, she found ways to subtly correct my parenting in front of others. No, Emma needs a sweater, she'll catch cold, she'd say, swooping in to override my decision. Or, Ethan shouldn't be eating that yet, Sarah. Didn't you read the parenting books I sent? But the worst moment came during dinner, when Eleanor launched into a story about how she had managed to work full-time while raising Michael properly. I never saw my career and motherhood as an either-or proposition, she told the table, looking directly at me. Some women these days seem to think they have to choose, but I always believed children benefit from seeing their mother be productive. In society. I caught Michael's cousin Lisa exchanging a glance with her husband, and Eleanor's sister Martha pressing her lips together disapprovingly. But no one said anything to counter Eleanor's implication that I'd chosen the easy route, that somehow caring for twins 24 hours a day was less productive than office work. After dinner, I found myself alone in the kitchen washing dishes while laughter echoed from the living room. Eleanor was showing family albums of Michael's childhood photos that I'd never even seen before, narrating stories of his upbringing as if to emphasize her superior expertise in all things Michael and parenting. Lisa came in briefly to drop off more dishes and squeezed my arm sympathetically, but said nothing. I scrubbed harder at an already clean plate and told myself that this too was part of earning my place in the family, that eventually they would see my value, that my dedication to creating a loving home for Michael and the twins would ultimately be recognized. But as water and tears mixed together in the sink, a small voice inside me whispered that perhaps this pattern wasn't going to change through patience and effort alone. By the time Thanksgiving approached, the twins were 18 months old and developing their own little personalities. Emma was cautious but deeply curious, studying everything before engaging, while Ethan was all energy and impulse, diving headfirst into every new experience. I'd been planning our first real Thanksgiving as a family for weeks, excited to blend traditions from both Michael's family and mine. I'd ordered an heirloom turkey from a local farm, collected recipes that had been passed down through generations on both sides, and even practiced making my grandmother's famous sweet potato pie that had been the centerpiece of every childhood Thanksgiving I could remember. When Eleanor arrived the day before Thanksgiving, I was elbow-deep in pie dough. I thought we could incorporate some of my family traditions this year, I explained enthusiastically, showing her my grandmother's handwritten recipe card. Eleanor glanced at it dismissively. Well, that's a nice idea, Sarah, but the Matthews have our own Thanksgiving traditions. These aren't real family traditions for the twins. Not real family traditions. As if my heritage, my childhood, my family's customs somehow didn't count toward the twins' heritage. Before I could respond, Eleanor had taken over the kitchen, rearranging my carefully organized ingredients and pulling out her own recipes. Michael always expects his Thanksgiving while telling stories that predated my relationship with Michael, effectively placing me outside the family circle. Every attempt I made to contribute to the conversation was subtly redirected. But the situation truly deteriorated when Eleanor brought up college funds she claimed to be starting for the twins. I want to make sure they're properly educated, she said pointedly. Not everyone in the family had the advantage of completing their education. I stared at her, speechless. I had graduated summa cum laude from Boston University and had been considering an MBA before the twins were born. The implication that I was somehow undereducated because I'd given up my career was both inaccurate and deeply hurtful. That night, after Eleanor had gone back to her condo and the twins were asleep, I finally broke down and told Michael everything. I detailed the months of undermining comments, the way his mother consistently positioned me as an outsider in the family, and how she continually questioned my choices and parenting decisions. To my dismay, Michael's response was, "That's just mom being mom, Sarah. She's always been opinionated. You're being a little too sensitive." Too sensitive. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Your mother told our children that my family traditions aren't real. She implied I'm uneducated. She treats me like an interloper in my own home. That's not me being sensitive, Michael. That's your mother being disrespectful. The argument that followed was our first serious one about Eleanor's behavior. Michael accused me of exaggerating, of misinterpreting his mother's helpful suggestions. I felt myself being gaslit, my experiences dismissed by the person who should have been my strongest ally. We went to bed angry that night, with Michael sleeping in the guest room. As I lay awake, listening to the twins breathing through the monitor, I found myself making excuses for Michael's blindness to his mother's behavior. He'd grown up with her, so her critical nature was normalized for him. He worked long hours, and wasn't present for most of her visits. He was under pressure at work. I told myself that with more time, more concrete examples, he would eventually see the pattern. Despite the hurt and anger, I resolved to try harder to make this relationship work, for the sake of our family. But something had shifted inside. Me, that Thanksgiving night, a small seed of resentment had taken root, and no amount of rationalizing could stop it from growing. Christmas was always my favorite holiday. But that year, as the twins approached their second birthday, I felt only dread as the season approached. Eleanor had announced, not asked, that she would be spending the entire Christmas week at our house to make it special for the children. 7 full days of navigating her criticism while trying to create magical holiday memories for Emma and Ethan. I threw myself into preparations, determined to make everything perfect despite Eleanor's inevitable disapproval. I decorated the house with care, baked traditional cookies, wrapped presents with coordinating paper and hand-tied bows, and planned activities I hoped the twins would remember fondly in years to come. Eleanor arrived with twice as many gifts for the twins as Michael and I had purchased, immediately criticizing the artificial tree we'd chosen for safety reasons with active toddlers, and rearranging the ornaments I'd carefully placed. The silver ones should be distributed evenly, Sarah. Didn't your mother teach you how to decorate a tree properly? Every morning brought new criticisms. The twins' outfits didn't match. The breakfast wasn't what Michael always enjoyed at Christmas. The house was too warm, too cool, too cluttered, too sterile. I felt like I was performing on a stage where the script kept changing, and no matter what I did, I was failing. The situation reached a breaking point 3 days before Christmas, when I overheard Eleanor talking to the twins as they played with new toys she'd brought. "Daddy works very hard to buy this nice house and all your beautiful toys," she was telling them. "He goes to his important job every day so you can have everything you need." There was no mention of my contribution, no acknowledgement that I was the one who researched developmentally appropriate toys, who child-proofed the house, who kissed bumped knees and soothed night terrors, who taught them words and songs and emotional regulation. In Eleanor's narrative, I simply didn't exist. That evening, while Michael was working late and the twins were asleep, I finally gathered my courage. "Eleanor," I said carefully, "I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't undermine my parenting decisions in front of the twins. And I think it's important they understand that both their father and I contribute to this family, just in different ways." Eleanor's expression hardened immediately. "Contribute? By staying home all day? Michael is the one working himself to exhaustion while you play with the children." "Being a full-time parent isn't playing," I responded, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "It's demanding, important work." Eleanor actually laughed. "Work? Sarah, you're just the babysitter, a glorified nanny. Michael pays all the bills while you get to lounge around the house all day. Many women would be grateful for such an arrangement instead of complaining about it." Just the babysitter. The words hit me like a physical blow. 18 months of sleep deprivation, of putting everyone's needs before my own, of sacrificing my career, my body, my identity reduced to just the babysitter. When Michael came home an hour later, I said nothing about the confrontation. Eleanor was all smiles, and I swallowed my hurt and anger, not wanting to ruin Christmas with what Michael would probably dismiss as another overreaction. That night, and many nights that followed, I lay awake questioning everything. Had leaving my career been a mistake? Was I truly contributing nothing of value to our family? The questions circled endlessly, accompanied by growing resentment not just toward Eleanor but increasingly toward Michael, who remained oblivious to how his mother's behavior was affecting me. I began to feel invisible in my own home, my worth, reduced to the tasks I performed rather than the love and care I provided. The professional confidence I once possessed was eroding, replaced by constant self-doubt. Was I overreacting? Was I just being too sensitive? Or was I allowing myself to be systematically devalued by someone who should have been a support rather than a source of pain? January arrived with freezing temperatures that matched the growing coldness between Michael and me. The tension from Eleanor's Christmas visit lingered, though I hadn't shared the "just the babysitter" comment with him. I was becoming increasingly withdrawn, going through the motions of daily life while feeling disconnected from the joy I once found in motherhood. The twins were thriving despite everything, now stringing words together into simple sentences, and developing more independence each day. I was beginning to think about possible part-time work options for when they started preschool, not just for the income but to reclaim some of my professional identity that had been so thoroughly dismissed by Eleanor. It was amid these tentative plans for the future that Eleanor called Michael one evening to arrange what she termed a family meeting about important financial matters. She didn't consult me, didn't consider whether such a meeting fit into our family schedule, simply informed Michael it would happen the following Sunday afternoon. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see not just Eleanor, but also Michael's older brother James and his wife Veronica, and his younger sister Amber with her husband Derek. Eleanor had apparently told everyone to arrive at 3, right when the twins would be waking from their naps, throwing off their entire schedule. I hurriedly prepared snacks and drinks while settling the cranky twins in their play area, acutely aware of being cast in the servile role Eleanor clearly believed was appropriate for me. Once everyone was settled, Eleanor cleared her throat. Importantly, "I've called this meeting because I'm concerned about our family finances," she announced, as if the family's money was communal property she had rights to discuss. "Specifically, I'm worried that Michael is working too hard and stretching himself too thin financially." Her gaze shifted pointedly to me. "I think it's time we discussed how to reduce unnecessary expenses." The implication was clear even before she continued. "Michael's father and I raised 3 children on one income, but times were different then. We were careful with money and didn't overextend ourselves." Again, her eyes found me, as if I was single-handedly bankrupting the family with extravagant spending. The truth was that we lived comfortably but modestly. We'd purchased a home within our means, drove practical vehicles, and our biggest expenses were the twins' medical bills from a complicated birth and Eleanor's frequent necessary purchases. For her grandchildren, that often arrived with the tag still attached, and the receipt, just in case you want to exchange it for cash to buy something more practical. "Michael and I manage our finances just fine," I said quietly but firmly. "We made a joint decision about our current arrangement based on what works for our family." "And that arrangement," Eleanor countered immediately, "involves Sarah contributing nothing financially while enjoying free rent and food." Several family members shifted uncomfortably, but I noticed James nodding slightly in agreement. Something inside me snapped. 2 years of accumulated hurt, dismissal, and devaluation came pouring out. Nothing financially? Let me tell you what nothing looks like, Eleanor. Nothing is waking up at 5:30 every morning and not sitting down until 9 at night. Nothing is simultaneously managing 2 toddlers with different needs, personalities, and schedules. Nothing is cooking, cleaning, laundry, shopping, scheduling doctor appointments, researching developmental milestones, creating educational activities, and maintaining this entire household so Michael can focus on his work. Nothing is being on call 24 hours a day with no weekends, no sick days, and no vacation time. My voice was shaking, but I couldn't stop. If you think what I do is worth nothing, maybe you should try doing it for a week. Just 1 week. Eleanor's expression hardened. That's what any mother does, Sarah. The difference is that real mothers also contribute financially to their households. They don't expect a free ride. I stood up abruptly, tears threatening despite my best efforts to contain them. Excuse me, I managed to say before walking out of the room, out of the house, and into the freezing January afternoon without a coat. I walked around the block 3 times before the cold forced me back inside, where the family meeting had apparently concluded. That evening, after everyone had left and the twins were asleep, I tried one more time to make Michael understand. Your mother told your entire family that I contribute nothing and should be grateful for free rent and food, like I'm some kind of parasite instead of your wife and the mother of your children. Michael sighed heavily. She was harsh, I know. But try to see it from a working person's perspective, Sarah. Mom raised 3 kids while working full-time as an accountant. From her viewpoint, modern stay-at-home moms have it easier than she did. A working person's perspective. As if what I did day in and day out wasn't work. As if I was on some extended vacation while Michael toiled away. It was our biggest fight. Ever. Ending with Michael sleeping in the guest room again and me crying myself to sleep, feeling completely devalued and unseen. The worst part was the isolation. I'd gradually lost touch with most of my close friends after becoming a mother. Some had drifted away naturally as our lives took different paths. Others I'd distanced myself from when Eleanor's visits began consuming so much emotional energy that I had none left for social connections. Now, when I most needed support outside my marriage, I found myself alone with my hurt and anger, with no one to validate that what I was experiencing wasn't just oversensitivity, but genuine emotional harm. February brought no thaw in the tension between Michael and me. We moved around each other carefully, cordial for the twins' sake, but with a distance that grew more noticeable each day. Michael was spending more time at the office, and I suspected he was sharing his perspective on our problems with Eleanor during their frequent phone calls. The confirmation of this suspicion came when Eleanor created a family group chat that deliberately excluded me. Michael didn't mention it, but I discovered its existence when his phone chimed repeatedly one evening while he was in the shower, and I noticed Eleanor's name with the words "family decisions" on his notifications. I didn't read the messages. I've never been the type to invade privacy, but the existence of the chat itself spoke volumes about how Eleanor viewed me, as separate from family, not someone who should be included in family decisions. A week later, while scrolling through social media during a rare quiet moment, I saw that Eleanor had shared an article titled, "The Problem with Stay-at-Home Parents, Setting Poor Examples for Modern Children." Her accompanying comment read, "Interesting perspective on how children learn about work ethic and responsibility. Proud of my son Michael working so hard while the woman watching his kids seems to think running a household is equal to a real job." The post had several likes, including from James and, to my complete shock, from Michael. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone. The dismissal of my role was bad enough, but the woman watching his kids? Not their mother, not your daughter-in-law, not even Sarah. Just the woman. It stripped me of both my identity and my relationship to my own children. And Michael had liked the post. When he came home that evening, I confronted him immediately, showing him the post and his like. He glanced at it and shrugged. I didn't read it carefully. I just saw Mom posted something and hit like automatically. You didn't notice that your mother called me the woman watching your kids instead of their mother? You didn't notice she was publicly undermining me to your entire family and friend circle? Michael had the grace to look uncomfortable. She didn't mean it that way. You're being too sensitive again. Too sensitive. Those words again, the ultimate dismissal. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Michael eventually grabbing his keys and leaving to clear his head. I sat in our silent living room after he left, looking at the toys scattered across the floor, the fingerprints on the coffee table, the half-folded laundry on the couch, physical evidence of my daily work that somehow remained invisible to those who should value it most. Something shifted inside me that night. I realized with complete clarity that no amount of trying harder, being more patient, or making more effort would change how Eleanor saw me. And worse, her perspective was infecting Michael's view of my contribution to our family. If I continued to accept this devaluation, it would eventually erode not just my relationship with Michael, but my own sense of worth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I found myself researching articles about the economic value of stay-at-home parents. What I discovered was both validating and infuriating. Economists had calculated the market value of the work done by stay-at-home parents, and the figures were staggering. If I were to be paid for all the roles I fulfilled: childcare provider, house cleaner, cook, laundry service, household manager, administrative assistant, educator, and more, I would be earning a six-figure salary. Article after article confirmed what I instinctively knew. The work I did had immense economic value, even if it didn't come with a paycheck. The research became therapeutic for me, a way to reclaim my sense of value despite Eleanor's persistent undermining. I began taking notes, calculating hours, listing tasks, and researching the market rates for each service I provided to our family. With each calculation, I felt a little piece of my confidence return. Eleanor might not value what I did, but the marketplace certainly would, to the tune of thousands of dollars per month. As February turned to March, I continued my research while outwardly maintaining our family routine. The twins were approaching their second birthday, becoming more verbal and independent each day. Michael and I had reached an uneasy truce, avoiding the topics of Eleanor and my role in the family while focusing on day-to-day logistics. Eleanor's visits continued, though I'd begun scheduling more activities outside the house on Sundays to limit my exposure to her critical comments. The seed planted during my late-night research was growing, taking shape as a plan I wasn't yet sure I would execute. I began documenting my daily activities in meticulous detail. Every diaper change, meal preparation, educational activity, cleaning task, errand, and household management duty. I tracked my hours like I would at a corporate job, noting start and end times for each task and categorizing them by type of service. After 2 weeks of documentation, the results were eye-opening. On average, I was working over 100 hours per week with no days off. My day started at 5:30 with the twins and often didn't end until after 10, when I finished preparing for the next day. During those hours, I functioned as a nanny, preschool teacher, personal chef, house cleaner, laundress, personal shopper, household manager, and administrative assistant all rolled into one. I researched the market rates for each of these services. In our area, consulting job listings, service websites, and professional organizations to ensure my figures were accurate. A full-time live-in nanny for twins would cost at minimum $25 per hour, more with the level of educational enrichment I provided. A house cleaner would charge at least $30 per hour. A personal chef preparing 3 meals daily would command a significant salary. Even at conservative estimates, the market value of my services exceeded $14,000 per month, well over what I had earned in my corporate marketing job. The realization was simultaneously empowering and infuriating. I'd allowed Eleanor and by extension Michael to make me question my worth when in fact, my economic contribution to our family was substantial. If Michael had to pay for all the services I provided, his salary alone wouldn't cover it. With this knowledge firmly in hand, I created a professional invoice using the same software I'd used in my marketing career. I listed each service separately, with the corresponding market rate, hours worked, and total value. I added a family discount line with a cheeky 50% reduction, bringing the monthly total to just over $7,000. I included detailed descriptions of each service and attached my 2-week activity log as supporting documentation. As I worked on the invoice, I struggled with whether I would actually send it. Would it only worsen the family tensions? Would Michael see it as a hostile act rather than the statement of value I intended? But after a particularly dismissive comment from Eleanor about me lounging around the house all day, while Michael worked himself to exhaustion, my decision crystallized. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about challenging the pervasive devaluation of caregiving work that affected millions of women. It was about making visible the invisible labor that kept our family and countless others functioning. It was about teaching my children, especially Emma, that their worth wasn't determined by a paycheck, but by the value they brought to the world, whatever form that took. With renewed determination, I finalized the invoice, dating it for the 1st of April, the day after Eleanor's next scheduled family meeting that once again excluded me. The last day of March arrived with Eleanor's family meeting scheduled for 7 in the evening. Michael had arranged for his mother and siblings to come after the twins' bedtime, clearly hoping to avoid a repeat of the January confrontation. I put the twins to bed with extra stories and songs, savoring their sleepy hugs and love you mommy whispers, drawing strength from the little people who never questioned my value. Once they were asleep, I retreated to our home office while the family gathered in the living room. I could hear the murmur of voices and occasional laughter, the casual closeness from which I'd been deliberately excluded. Rather than dwelling on the hurt, I focused on finalizing my plan. I had prepared a professional email with my invoice attached, along with links to economic analyses of household labor and childcare costs. The recipient list included not just Eleanor but everyone on the Family Decisions chat and those who had liked Eleanor's social media post about stay-at-home parents. My hands trembled slightly as I reviewed the email one last time. The subject line read, "Economic Valuation of Household Services. Invoice for review. Professional and unemotional." Despite the feelings churning inside me, the body of the email was equally businesslike. As my contribution to this family has been repeatedly questioned, I'm providing this documentation of the economic value I provide to our household. The attached invoice represents 1 month of services at current market rates with a generous family discount applied. Supporting documentation is included for reference. This is not a request for payment, but rather an educational document for those who measure value solely in financial terms. I took a deep breath and clicked send, then closed my laptop and went to bed before the meeting concluded. I didn't want to see Michael's immediate reaction or face questions from his family. This wasn't about confrontation, but about silent assertion of my worth. The fallout began the next morning at 6:15 when my phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen and I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times in succession, then sent a text message so loaded with capitalized words and angry emojis that it was barely coherent. The essence was that I was petty and disrespectful, and had embarrassed the entire family with my ridiculous stunt. Michael had apparently slept in the guest room again, leaving early for work without speaking to me. By noon, my phone was flooded with messages from various family members, ranging from James's outraged defense of his mother to Amber's surprisingly thoughtful questions about how I'd calculated the figures. Veronica, James's wife, sent a simple text, "Call me when you can talk privately." The next few days were tense beyond description. Michael came home late each evening, barely speaking except about the twins' immediate needs. Eleanor called multiple times daily, leaving increasingly hostile voicemails that I deleted without listening to completely. Several extended family members who'd been on the email list reached out with their own opinions, mostly critical, but a few unexpectedly supportive. I maintained my silence, neither defending nor apologizing for the invoice. It spoke for itself. The turning point came 5 days later when Veronica called. She was a pediatrician who worked 4 days a week while employing a nanny for her 3 children. "I showed your invoice to our nanny," she said without preamble when I answered. "She said you substantially undervalued the childcare portion. She charges us more for 3 older children with a more regular schedule than what you calculated for twins with round-the-clock care." The genuine surprise in Veronica's voice was validating. "I never really thought about everything you handle," she continued. "When James and I decided I'd continue working, we made that choice partly because paying for household help still left my salary with a substantial surplus. But you're right that the economic value of those services is enormous." That evening, Michael finally came home at a reasonable hour and asked to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, the invoice printed and lying between us. "Veronica called me today," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "She made some points I hadn't considered." He tapped the invoice. "Did you really research all these rates?" I nodded. "Current market rates in our area, with documentation for each figure." He was quiet for a long moment. "I never said what "You do isn't valuable, Sarah." "You never said it was either," I countered. "When your mother called me just the babysitter and said I contribute nothing to this family, you weren't there to hear it. When she told your entire family I should be grateful for free rent and food, you didn't defend me. When she called me the woman watching his kids on social media, you liked the post." Michael winced at each example. "I didn't know about some of that, and I should have paid more attention to how she was treating you." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the first acknowledgement of the problem I'd received in over 2 years. "I'm going to talk to her," he said finally. "This has gone too far." The next day, Michael took the twins to visit Eleanor alone. He was gone for over 3 hours, and when he returned, his expression was grim but resolved. "I told her she either treats you with respect as my wife and the twins' mother, or she won't be welcome in our home," he said simply. It didn't go well, but it needed to be said. It was the first time in our relationship that Michael had truly stood up to his mother, and while I knew one conversation wouldn't solve everything, it represented a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. The invoice had made visible what words alone couldn't convey, and in doing so, had finally broken through the willful blindness that had allowed the situation to deteriorate for so long. It's been 3 months since I sent that invoice, and I won't pretend everything magically resolved overnight. Eleanor initially refused to speak to either of us for several weeks, sending gifts for the twins through James and Veronica rather than visiting. When she finally did resume Sunday visits, they were shorter and notably more subdued. She still occasionally makes comments that set my teeth on edge, but they lack the previous venom. And more importantly, Michael now notices them and often counters them directly. "Actually, Mom, Sarah's decision to stay home with the twins was the best financial decision we could have made considering childcare costs," he'll say. Or, "Emma and Ethan are thriving because of Sarah's dedication to their development." These defenses mean more to me than any apology Eleanor could offer. The invoice itself has taken on a life of its own. Veronica shared it with her mother's group, and several women adapted it to calculate their own household contributions. One friend from my former marketing days works with a family advocacy nonprofit and asked permission to use an anonymized version in their educational materials about the economic value of caregiving work. This unexpected community that formed around the invoice became a source of connection and purpose for me. I started a small online support group for stay-at-home parents dealing with family devaluation, which has grown to over 30 members sharing stories, strategies, and solidarity. Perhaps the most profound change has been within me. Creating that invoice forced me to confront my own internalized bias about productive work. Despite my feminist values, I had absorbed cultural messages that work without pay was somehow less valuable, less worthy of respect. I found myself calculating my worth in dollars and cents because I knew that was the language Eleanor and others would understand. But in doing so, I discovered just how deeply I'd been affected by the same devaluing mindset I was fighting against. Now, when I rock a feverish toddler at 3 a.m. or spend an hour helping the twins learn to identify emotions through play, I no longer hear that nagging voice questioning whether this is real work. I know with bone-deep certainty that the key care I provide is valuable beyond measure, not despite being unpaid, but regardless of it. Michael and I have begun couples counseling to repair the damage done by 2 years of misalignment and miscommunication. In one particularly powerful session, he admitted that he'd failed to stand up for me, partly because acknowledging his mother's behavior would mean facing painful truths about his own childhood under her critical eye. "It was easier to tell you that you were being too sensitive than to admit that I've been sensitized to ignore her behavior," he explained. "But watching her treat you the way she treated my dad made it impossible to keep denying the pattern." As for Eleanor, our relationship remains a work in progress. Last week, I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone in our kitchen while I was putting away groceries in the pantry. "The twins are lucky to have such a devoted mother," she said, not realizing I could hear. "Sarah gives them the kind of attention I wish I could have given Michael." It was a small acknowledgement, and I don't know if she would have said it to my face, but it represented progress I wouldn't have thought possible 6 months ago. The truth is, I no longer need Eleanor's approval or validation. The invoice served its purpose in making visible what had been invisible, in quantifying the unquantifiable so it could be understood by those who measure value in dollars. But the real worth of what I do each day as I raise these 2 amazing little humans can't be captured on an invoice. It's in Emma's growing vocabulary and Ethan's contagious laugh. It's in the secure attachment that allows them to explore their world with confidence. It's in the thousands of small moments that weave together to create childhoods rich with love, attention, and care. If you're out there feeling undervalued for the invisible work you do, whether as a parent, caregiver, volunteer, or in any role where your contribution isn't measured by a paycheck, remember that worth and compensation aren't the same thing. Your work has value whether others recognize it or not. But sometimes, just sometimes, creating an invoice might be exactly what's needed to open eyes and change hearts. Have you ever had to find a creative way to make someone recognize your value? Or have you struggled with feeling undervalued for work that doesn't come with a paycheck? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and finding your worth in a world that too often measures value only in financial terms. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most important recognition of your worth should come from within, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't help others see it too.